It was a typical day in the quiet town of Alton. The morning sun was just beginning to rise, casting long shadows over the sleepy streets. A small research facility located just outside of town, owned by the Earth Defense Initiative, EDI, buzzed with quiet activity as the first shift of scientists began their day. Inside, there was an air of excitement as a team of experts from all over the world gathered around a new discovery, one that could change the fate of humanity forever. Dr. Maria Jansen, the head scientist of the project, was staring at the readings on the large screen before her. The numbers on the display were unlike anything they had seen before. The machine had been designed to study energy signatures deep within the Earth's crust, but today it had picked up something far beyond their expectations. "Everyone, come over here," Dr. Jansen called out, her voice trembling slightly with excitement. "You need to see this." Her colleagues gathered around, peering over her shoulder at the display. The screen showed a massive surge of energy emanating from deep beneath the surface. It was unlike anything they had ever encountered, an energy that was ancient, powerful, and incredibly concentrated. The readings were impossible to ignore. "Where did this come from?" asked Dr. Kyle Thomas, one of the senior researchers. He was a skeptical man, always questioning everything. But even he couldn't deny the magnitude of what they were seeing. "I don't know," Dr. Jansen replied, her brow furrowed with confusion. "This energy, it shouldn't exist. Not here, not at all." The data was clear. There was no natural explanation for it. The energy signature was not from any known source on Earth, nor could it be explained by any natural processes the team had studied. It was different. A new form of energy, one that appeared to be ancient, buried deep beneath the surface for eons. "Is this some kind of mistake?" Dr. Jansen muttered under her breath, but she quickly dismissed the thought. "No, the data is clean. This is real." The energy had been dormant, hidden away in the planet's crust, until now. But something had triggered its release. The team wasn't sure what. It was as if the Earth itself had decided it was time to reveal its secret. "Can we trace the source?" Dr. Thomas asked, his voice quieter now, a sense of unease creeping into his tone. Dr. Jansen tapped a few keys on the console, pulling up more detailed scans of the area. The source seemed to be located near an ancient network of caves, in a remote part of the planet where no one had ever ventured before. These caves were hidden away, known to only a handful of explorers who had mapped the region years ago. The mystery was only deepening. "We need to go there now," Dr. Jansen said, her voice firm. There was no time to waste. If this energy was real, then it could change everything. Humanity needed to know what they were dealing with. Hours later, a team of scientists, geologists, and military personnel were assembled at the edge of the caves. The team, led by Dr. Jansen, carefully made their way into the dark, narrow tunnels. The air inside was damp, and the walls seemed to hum with an unfamiliar energy, as if the very cave system itself was alive. The deeper they went, the stronger the pulse of energy became, until it felt as though the entire cave was vibrating with it. They finally reached a large chamber deep inside the cave. The walls were covered in strange markings, ancient symbols that no one could understand. But it was what lay at the center of the room that drew the attention of everyone present. In the middle of the chamber, there was a massive glowing crystal. It seemed to pulse with energy, and as the team drew closer, they could feel the power emanating from it. It was not a natural crystal. This was something different. Something purposeful. Dr. Jansen approached the crystal, her hands trembling as she reached out to touch it. The moment her fingers made contact with the surface, a surge of energy shot through her body. She gasped, pulling her hand back in shock, but the feeling was unlike anything she had ever experienced. It was as though the crystal had unlocked something deep within her. "Are you all right?" Dr. Thomas asked, his voice filled with concern. Dr. Jansen stood still for a moment, her mind racing. She didn't know how to explain it, But she knew one thing for certain. This power, this energy, was unlike anything humanity had ever encountered before. And now, it was theirs. The team worked quickly to analyze the crystal, collecting samples and trying to understand its properties. But the more they studied it, the more they realized that the crystal was only a small part of something far larger. It was a key to unlocking a force that had been hidden from the galaxy for millennia. Back at the facility, the team worked tirelessly to understand the full scope of the energy they had uncovered. But as they ran more tests, they began to notice something unsettling. The energy was spreading. Slowly, but surely, it was reaching out, connecting with other areas of Earth. And it wasn't just affecting their planet, it was reaching into space. A deep, uneasy feeling settled over Dr. Jansen as she stared at the data. This power was not just a curiosity. It was a weapon, a tool, something that could change the entire galaxy. And humanity had just unlocked it. The galaxy had no idea what was coming, and neither did Earth. The following days passed in a blur of activity. Dr. Maria Jansen barely had time to breathe as the discovery of the ancient energy stone reverberated through the scientific community. News of the find spread like wildfire, and soon the Earth Defense Initiative, EDI, was receiving attention from all corners of the globe. Governments, military leaders, and high-ranking officials demanded answers. But no one could provide them. No one knew what they had found, and the unease about the mysterious energy only grew. Deep within the research facility, Dr. Jansen and her team were working tirelessly, trying to decipher the ancient symbols etched into the walls of the cave and understand the full extent of the energy they had uncovered. They had sent some of their findings to experts in archaeology and linguistics, hoping for a breakthrough. But the ancient markings remained a puzzle. The energy signature was still a mystery, and the crystal, while emitting immense power, seemed to be dormant. They had yet to unlock its full potential. Meanwhile, on the global stage, whispers began to spread. Some believed that this discovery could be the key to humanity's future, a tool that could elevate Earth to a position of unimaginable power. Others, however, feared what such a force could mean. If humans controlled this energy, what would stop them from becoming the most dangerous force the galaxy had ever seen? The tension was palpable, and nations began to prepare for something they couldn't fully understand. But Dr. Jansen wasn't thinking about politics or military power. She was consumed with a different question. What exactly did this power mean for humanity? How could one small discovery change the fate of the entire human race? It wasn't until the evening of the 7th day after the initial discovery that something truly extraordinary occurred. Dr. Jansen had been conducting experiments with the crystal alone in the lab. The other team members had left for the day, leaving her to study the object in peace. She was focused on a device she had built, one designed to measure the crystal's resonance. She had a strange feeling, a hunch, that something had changed. There was a difference in the energy's pattern. As she carefully adjusted the readings, her fingers brushed against the crystal. A surge of power shot through her, and for the first time, she felt the full force of its energy. But this time, it was different. This time, she could sense it inside her, spreading like a wave through her body. It felt as if the crystal had unlocked something buried deep within her, something primal, something human. For a split second, everything went black. Then, as if a switch had been flipped, the world around her came into sharp focus. Her senses were heightened, her mind clearer than it had ever been before. Dr. Jansen felt a wave of euphoria wash over her, and her first instinct was to stand up, feeling an overwhelming surge of power in her limbs. Her heart raced, not from fear, but from excitement. She could feel the energy thrumming through her veins. It was as though she had become one with the crystal, and it was now a part of her. She was no longer just a scientist. She was something more. She could see everything with perfect clarity. The way the air moved, the way the particles in the room danced. She could sense every shift in the atmosphere, every fluctuation of energy, every change in the environment around her. She could even feel the crystal's energy resonating within the walls of the facility. But there was something else, something more disturbing. The energy was reaching beyond the facility. She could sense it stretching outward, as if it were calling to something, or someone, far beyond Earth. The resonance of the crystal was affecting more than just the lab. It was sending ripples through space, and those ripples were being felt by distant civilizations. Dr. Jansen staggered back, feeling dizzy from the power that surged through her. Her breath came in shallow gasps as she tried to process what had just happened. The crystal had connected with her, and in doing so, it had unlocked something. An ability, a force, that no human had ever experienced before. She quickly composed herself and stood up, her hands trembling. She had to tell the others. They needed to know what had happened. They needed to understand the implications of what this power could mean, not just for Earth, but for the entire galaxy. But before she could make her way to the communications room, something strange happened. The lights in the facility flickered, and the hum of the machines began to distort. The air felt charged, almost electric. Dr. Jansen turned and rushed to the central control room, her heart pounding in her chest. As she entered, the screams before her erupted in static, and a low mechanical hum filled the room. Then a voice, deep, distant, and otherworldly, echoed through the speakers. "You have awakened something you do not understand." Dr. Jansen froze. The voice was not from Earth. It was a message from somewhere far beyond the stars, and it was unmistakably clear. Humanity had unknowingly triggered something ancient, something powerful, and something far greater than they could have ever imagined. The galaxy, it seemed, was watching. The voice echoed through the control room again, sending a chill down Dr. Jansen's spine. She stood frozen, her heart pounding as the words reverberated in her ears. She wasn't sure if the voice was a warning, a threat, or something else entirely. But there was no mistaking it. They had just made contact with something far beyond their understanding. "You have awakened something you do not understand," the voice repeated, more forceful now, as though the being speaking knew that it had their full attention. Dr. Jansen quickly activated the emergency comm system and connected with her team, her hands trembling as she sent the signal. It didn't take long for the others to respond, their faces appearing on the screen. "What is it, Dr. Jansen?" Dr. Wilson, one of her colleagues, asked, his voice laced with concern. "I don't know. Something just spoke to me," she said, struggling to compose herself. "I felt the power of the crystal like never before. It's connected to me. And now I'm hearing voices from somewhere in the galaxy." "Are you sure you're okay?" Dr. Wilson asked, his face narrowing in concern. This sounds impossible." "I'm fine," Dr. Jansen replied quickly, though she wasn't entirely sure she was. "I can feel the power coursing through me. And I think it's doing something that's reaching out far beyond Earth." The team was silent for a moment as they absorbed her words. Finally, Dr. Zhang spoke up. "We need to be cautious. This could be far more dangerous than we thought. We don't know who or what is on the other end of that signal." Dr. Jansen nodded. She was fully aware of the danger now. But the voice had said they'd awakened something. And that meant something had been asleep, waiting for humanity to make its move. The galaxy was reacting, and whatever was watching them was powerful, ancient, and perhaps even hostile. The team quickly began to assess the data they had collected from the crystal. Dr. Jansen's discoveries were far beyond anything they had initially imagined. The crystal wasn't just a source of energy. It was a beacon, a signal amplifier, and perhaps even a key to unlocking deeper, darker secrets of the universe. But with it came risks. A powerful energy like this, untapped for eons, was never meant to be unleashed. Dr. Jansen couldn't help but wonder how many others across the galaxy have been monitoring the human race's every move. How many civilizations had watched Earth's progress, waiting to see if humanity would reach a level of power that could tip the scales. While her team continued to analyze the crystal's data, Dr. Jansen found herself standing by the lab window, gazing out at the vast expanse of space. The stars were bright, faraway points of light in the dark void. But for the first time, they felt impossibly close. She wasn't sure if the galaxy was watching her, or if it was simply waiting for something to happen. And then it came. A surge of energy crackled through the facility, throwing the lights into chaos. The walls seemed to hum, vibrating with an unsettling intensity. Dr. Jansen staggered back, her pulse racing, as the ground beneath her feet trembled. "It's starting," she whispered. The signal from the crystal was growing stronger. The voice from the galaxy was no longer a whisper, but a clear, unmistakable force. It wasn't just speaking to Dr. Jansen anymore. It was speaking to everyone. "Humanity has awoken the old power." The voice echoed through the facility, its tone dark and filled with an ominous finality. "And now you will face the consequences." The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. Dr. Jansen felt a cold sweat on the back of her neck. There was no denying it anymore. Humanity had crossed a line, and they were no longer alone in the universe. The crystal, which had seemed like a simple artifact at first, now felt like a weapon. And its power was beyond anything they had imagined. The voice that spoke to her wasn't from a distant galaxy. It was from an ancient civilization that had been watching Earth for centuries, waiting for a moment like this. The crystal wasn't just a source of energy. It was a signal that had attracted the attention of something vast, something old, something dangerous. "We need to prepare," Dr. Jansen said, her voice trembling with fear and determination. "The galaxy is coming, and we've just given them a reason to notice us." Outside the lab, the sky darkened, as if the very stars were shifting in response to the newly awakened power. The galaxy, it seemed, had been watching humanity's rise for centuries, and now the consequences of their discovery were unfolding. And Dr. Jansen knew, deep in her gut, that this was only the beginning. The room was silent, only the low hum of the control panel filling the air. Dr. Jansen stared at the data streams on the screen, her eyes wide with shock. She hadn't been prepared for this moment. No one had. Humanity had discovered something so ancient, so powerful, that it had caught the attention of forces far beyond their reach. Forces that were already watching. Her heart raced as she replayed the chilling words that had reverberated in her mind. "You will face the consequences." The voice from the galaxy wasn't just a warning, it was a promise. The galaxy had reacted, and humanity was about to learn what it meant to be at the center of something far larger than themselves. "We need to prepare for the worst," Dr. Jansen said, breaking the silence. Her voice was steady, but the underlying fear was evident. "I have no idea what we're dealing with, but I know it's not something we can handle alone." Dr. Wilson, who had been quiet since the transmission, nodded in agreement. "We need to alert the authorities, everyone. This is beyond just us now." The team scrambled into action. They knew they had to alert the world, but the threat was so unprecedented that Dr. Jansen wasn't sure anyone would believe them. How could they? It sounded too absurd, too impossible. Alien life, an ancient power beyond their understanding, and now a galactic response. It felt like something out of a movie. But it wasn't a movie. It was real, and it was happening. The crystal's pulse was growing stronger with every passing minute, its energy radiating throughout the facility. The same energy that had given them the power to awaken this forgotten force now felt like a curse. What had seemed like a gift was quickly becoming their greatest mistake. Dr. John, one of the engineers, was the first to notice the anomaly. His voice cut through the room, tense and urgent. "Something's happening," he said, pointing to the console. "The crystal. It's emitting some kind of signal. It's not just sending out energy. It's receiving something." Dr. Jansen quickly moved to his side, her heart in her throat. The readings on the console were unlike anything they had encountered before. It wasn't just the crystal's energy source that had intensified. It was responding to something out there. Something massive. "Who are we talking to?" Dr. Jansen whispered, barely believing her own words. Before anyone could respond, the lights flickered. The entire facility seemed to groan under the pressure of whatever was happening. Dr. Jansen grabbed the edge of the desk to steady herself. The building was shaking, the walls trembling as if in the grip of some unseen force. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, everything stopped. The hum, the vibration, the noise. The building stood still, but the air felt charged, heavy with tension. Dr. Jansen's breath caught in her throat. She stared at the screen, where the last signal from the crystal blinked in bright, impossible-to-interpret code. Then, a message appeared. This time, it wasn't from the mysterious voice they had heard earlier, but it was worse, much worse. Warning, incoming galactic force. The words burned themselves into Dr. Jansen's mind. It was a warning, and it was clear. The galaxy was not just watching them anymore. It was preparing to act. But what was this galactic force, and what would it mean for humanity? Activate the defense protocols, Dr. Jansen commanded, her voice now firm with urgency. This is no longer just about research. This is survival. The team scrambled to follow her orders. They had no idea what kind of galactic force they were facing, but they had to be ready. The galaxy had just made its first move, and it wasn't here for diplomacy. Outside the facility, the sky had darkened once again. The stars, once distant and comforting, now felt like burning eyes, watching, waiting. Dr. Wilson looked over at Dr. Jansen, his face pale. "What if we can't stop them?" "We don't have a choice," she replied, her voice full of resolve. "We have to fight. We awakened this power, and now we have to face it." But even as she spoke, she knew the truth. No one was prepared for what was coming. Humanity had stirred the ancient forces of the galaxy, and now they would see the consequences of that decision. And in the deepest corner of the universe, something ancient stirred, ready to strike. The silence that had followed the cryptic message hung in the air like a heavy fog. Dr. Jansen's team worked frantically to activate every defense protocol they had. They had prepared for the unexpected, but they were nowhere near ready for what was unfolding. The magnitude of the threat was unlike anything they had ever considered. In the control room, Dr. Jansen paced nervously, eyes flicking to the screen where the mysterious signal was still flashing. The numbers and codes on the screen didn't make sense. They seemed to be shifting, changing, as if mocking their efforts to comprehend them. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing in on her chest, suffocating her. "Doctor, we're getting more signals," Jean called out. "It's getting stronger. Something's coming." A new pattern appeared on the screen. The frequency of the signals was intensifying, rising and falling like waves crashing against the shore. The crystal, the source of the strange power, was pulsing in sync with the signal. The energy in the facility seemed to hum with life, and Dr. Jansen could almost feel the pulse in her own chest. "What is it?" Wilson asked, his voice tight with fear. "What's happening?" Jansen swallowed hard. "The galaxy is responding," she said quietly. "It's not just watching us. It's preparing for something massive." Outside the windows of the facility, the night sky had turned a deep crimson, the stars flickering ominously. The usual peaceful view of the heavens now seemed menacing. Jansen's heart skipped a beat as she looked out, wondering if the entire galaxy was as aware of them as they were of it. A sudden explosion of light erupted from the center of the facility, blinding everyone in the room. The screens went black, and the entire structure seemed to groan under the pressure. The building shook violently, and alarms blared, signaling an overload of energy. Jansen's mind raced. "We need to shut it down. Now." She grabbed the emergency lever, but before she could pull it, the lights flickered back on. But what they saw was far worse than anything they had feared. On the main screen, a new image appeared, an image of something enormous, incomprehensible, and ancient. A massive structure, floating in the depths of space. It was something far beyond anything humanity had ever encountered, a weapon of unimaginable power. "Is that Wilson's voice trailed off in disbelief. Yes, Jansen whispered, her eyes wide with shock. That's it, the force we've unleashed. The image was a gigantic ship, far larger than any human-made vessel. Its surface was covered in sharp, jagged lines that seemed to pulse with energy, a strange dark glow surrounding it. The ship was unlike anything the human mind could comprehend. It had no visible engines, no identifiable structure, and yet it exuded an aura of absolute power. The moment it appeared, the stars in the sky seemed to tremble. What do we do? Wilson asked, voice trembling. Jansen didn't know. She could feel the weight of the world on her shoulders. This was bigger than her team, bigger than the research. They were in the middle of something that could end humanity's existence. The galaxy had never prepared for humans to unlock such power, and now they were facing the consequences. We need to get out of here, Jansen said, her voice shaking despite her attempts to sound calm. We need to warn the world. If that ship is real. But before she could finish her sentence, the lights flickered once again, and the ground beneath them trembled violently. The walls groaned as if in agony, and the entire facility seemed to shudder. The crystal, the source of the mysterious power, was vibrating uncontrollably. It was as if the very heart of the building was alive and angry. Jansen could hear the distant sound of sirens wailing. The moment had come, the moment she had feared, but never thought would actually arrive. The galaxy had noticed humanity, and it was coming for them. No one had expected humans to awaken something so powerful, and now the galaxy was making sure they knew the consequences. From the screen, the image of the massive ship blinked out of existence, replaced with a message that froze Jansen's blood. Prepare for the reckoning. Her mind went numb as the realization hit her. They had made a mistake they couldn't fix. Humanity's curiosity had led them to a discovery that had unleashed a chain of events they weren't prepared to face. Now the galaxy was going to make them pay for it. Suddenly, the crystal began to glow brighter than it ever had before. The energy levels spiked, overwhelming the facility systems. Sparks flew from the control panels, and the room plunged into darkness once again. We need to leave. Now, Jansen shouted, scrambling toward the exit. We need to warn everyone. But as the team ran for the door, the facility trembled once more. The sound of something massive approaching filled the air, as if the entire galaxy was closing in on them. Outside, the stars flickered ominously. The reckoning had begun. The ground trembled as Dr. Jansen and her team stumbled through the darkened hallways of the research facility. The once steady hum of the complex was now a chaotic blend of alarms, mechanical groans, and the frantic whispers of her panicked team. Jansen's heart raced, and her thoughts were a jumbled mess. The galaxy had never been this close. Whatever had been unleashed, whatever ancient power had been awakened, it was too late to reverse now. Doctor, John called out, his voice cracking. What's happening? What do we do? Jansen turned to face him, her expression grim. She didn't have the answers, but they couldn't afford to lose time. The reckoning had begun, and they needed to prepare for the worst. There was no going back. Humanity had crossed a line, and now the consequences were inevitable. There's no more time to waste, Jansen said through gritted teeth, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her. We need to reach the command center. Now. They rushed through the corridors, but the shaking continued, as though the entire facility was being drawn into the heart of something vast and unfathomable. The walls, once sturdy and reassuring, seemed fragile now, as if something enormous was watching them, waiting. The stench of metal burning filled the air, and every step felt heavier than the last. When they finally reached the control room, they were met with a scene of chaos. Sparks flew from several consoles, and the lights flickered erratically. The giant screens were filled with static, but in the center, a single message blinked repeatedly. Prepare for the reckoning. It was the same message from earlier, and now it was clear. The galaxy wasn't simply sending a warning, it was sending its judgment. "The ship, it's coming," Wilson whispered, eyes wide with terror. "The one we saw on the screen. It's real." Jansen's mind raced. She had no idea how to defend against something like this. No military force in the universe could withstand a force this powerful. And even if they could fight, how could they defeat something they didn't understand? "Can we shut down the crystal?" Zhang asked desperately, his face pale. "Maybe if we deactivate it, we can stop it all." Jansen shook her head, her stomach sinking. "No, it's too late. The crystal is connected to the very fabric of this event. Shutting it down now could trigger an even worse reaction." The group fell silent. There was no good answer. The only thing left to do was wait and hope that whatever force was descending upon them would show some mercy. But that was unlikely. Outside, the sky had turned a deep red. The stars, once a peaceful backdrop to the vastness of space, now burned with a fiery intensity. There was a palpable sense of dread hanging in the air, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. And then, without warning, the screens flickered to life once more. A new message appeared, this one in a language that no one on the team could understand. The symbols flashed across the screen, their meaning elusive, but the feeling was undeniable. It was an invitation, or perhaps a threat. "Prepare for your place in the galaxy." Jansen's blood ran cold. They had opened a door that they couldn't close. They had awakened something beyond their comprehension, and now the galaxy was reaching out to them, demanding their place in its ancient order. "Is this it?" Wilson asked, his voice barely audible. "Is this how it ends for us?" Jansen didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned to the window, staring out into the dark expanse of space. The massive ship from the previous transmission was closer now, its silhouette visible in the distance. It was enormous, too large to comprehend. The magnitude of it was overwhelming. It was as though the galaxy itself had finally come to collect on an old debt. Humanity's place in the universe had always been uncertain, but now that place was being defined by forces far beyond their control. Suddenly, the ground shook violently, and the walls of the facility groaned, as though they were on the brink of collapse. The lights went out again, and for a brief moment, there was nothing but the sound of their breathing, harsh and erratic in the dark. Then, the burst of light, bright, blinding, and searing. It was coming from the direction of the crystal. In an instant, the entire facility seemed to be pulled toward the light, as though gravity itself was changing its rules. Everything, the walls, the floor, the people, was being dragged in one direction, toward the heart of the storm. "We're too late," Jansen whispered. "There's nothing we can do now. The reckoning is here." Her voice, usually so steady, trembled as she spoke the words, but it was true. Humanity had awakened a force they could not understand, and now they were facing the full force of the galaxy's ancient power. Then everything stopped. The light flickered once more, then dimmed to a soft glow. The shaking ceased. The air felt strangely still, as if the universe itself had paused. But the silence was just as terrifying as the chaos had been. From the depths of space, the great ship loomed even closer. It was almost as if it had appeared out of nowhere, ready to impose its judgment on humanity. And in the control room, Jansen and her team could only wait for what would come next. Would they be crushed under the weight of the galaxy's power, or would humanity find a way to survive, to defy what seemed inevitable? The reckoning was upon them. The control room was silent, save for the steady hum of the failing equipment and the occasional distant rumble from the shaking building. Jansen and her team stood frozen, their faces pale, staring at the screens in front of them. The ship outside had grown impossibly large, eclipsing the stars as it drifted closer, casting a shadow over the entire facility. There was no escaping it now. The galaxy had come for them, and humanity was about to face its reckoning. Jansen's mind raced as she desperately searched for a solution, any kind of plan that could save them. But there was nothing. No technology on Earth had prepared them for this moment. Nothing in their wildest science fiction stories had ever foretold something like this. The power of the galaxy's ancient forces was beyond human comprehension. Suddenly, the screens flickered, and a deep, resonating voice filled the room. It wasn't human. It was alien, ancient, and powerful. Humanity, the voice boomed, you have crossed a line that should never have been crossed. The price for your defiance will now be paid in full. The words sent a chill down their spines. The voice was not one of mercy, nor of understanding. It was a declaration, a judgment passed from a being that had existed for longer than humanity could fathom. The entire galaxy was waiting to see if humans would be able to survive the consequences of their actions. Jansen closed her eyes, trying to steady her breath. This was it. There was no turning back. Prepare yourselves. The reckoning is upon you. The voice continued, and the screens displayed a terrifying image. A massive energy beam, its core glowing with the force of 1,000 suns, was aimed directly at their planet. It was coming for Earth. She turned to her team. We need to act now, or it's over. We can't stop it, but we can try to delay it. We still have control of some of the defensive systems. We can't give up yet. Zhang, trembling, nodded. What do we do? Jansen's mind raced, but there was nothing left. The only option was to fight. They might not be able to win, but they could buy humanity a little more time to figure out how to survive. With shaking hands, she punched commands into the control panel, redirecting the facility's power systems to send a signal to Earth's remaining defense stations. It was a long shot, but it was all they had left. Defend the planet. Humanity's fate is in your hands now, Earth. The voice from the ship boomed once more, but there was an undertone of something else now. Curiosity, perhaps, or a faint glimmer of respect. The galaxy had seen humanity's defiance, and it wasn't sure what to make of it. For a brief moment, the team's efforts seemed to matter. A flicker of hope burned deep within Jansen's chest. Perhaps there was a way out of this. As she turned to face the windows, the massive ship loomed ever closer. But this time, there was a change. It was subtle at first, but undeniable. The energy beam that had been aimed at Earth began to waver, as if it was hesitating, as if the forces behind it were reconsidering. What's happening? Wilson whispered, his voice full of disbelief. Jansen stared at the display. It's slowing down. It's reacting to our defenses. Is it possible? Zhang asked, looking hopeful for the first time in hours. It could be, Jansen said slowly. We might have shown them something they weren't expecting. Humanity might just have earned a chance. But we have to act fast. The team rushed back to their posts. There was still no certainty, but they knew one thing. The galaxy was watching them. And for the first time, humanity had shown it was willing to fight for its survival. Outside, the enormous ship loomed just above the planet's atmosphere. The tension in the room was palpable. The team continued to scramble, adjusting their systems to further delay the incoming assault. It was their last chance. The galaxy was waiting for them to make a mistake, to give in to fear. But humanity wouldn't back down. A low rumble shook the room. And suddenly, the voice spoke again. But this time, it was different. There was no anger, no condemnation. Just a calm, almost curious tone. Humanity, you have proven yourselves. The reckoning is not yours to bear. You have passed your test. Jansen blinked in disbelief. The voice continued. You are no longer just a small piece in the galaxy's grand design. You will be watched, but now your fate is in your hands. Proceed carefully. And just like that, the presence, the immense force that had been bearing down on them, seemed to withdraw. The energy beam dissipated, and the ship above Earth slowed, coming to a hovering position, as if waiting. The team stood frozen, not knowing whether to celebrate or wait for the next wave of destruction. We did it, Wilson said, his voice thick with disbelief. Jansen looked around at her team, feeling the weight of the moment. The galaxy had given humanity a choice, a chance to prove themselves. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: humanity had earned its place among the stars. The door to the control room creaked open, and the team could hear the faint sounds of distant alarms and systems shutting down. They were no longer in imminent danger, but the weight of the moment still hung heavily in the air. Jansen exhaled slowly and turned to face her team. "We've been given a chance," she said, "but this is only the beginning. The galaxy is watching, and we have to be ready for whatever comes next." As the ship above Earth lingered in the distance, humanity's reckoning had not come to an end. Instead, it had just begun. The consequences of their actions would ripple through the stars, and the galaxy would remember the day humanity refused to bow to their destiny. For now, humanity had earned their place in the galaxy, and the universe would never forget it.